नमस्कार, लोकगाथा में आपका स्वागत है। आज 1 वर्ष के पश्चात पुनः हमारे साथ अजय भाई जुड़े हुए हैं। जब भी अजय भैया आते हैं, वो उस विषय के ऊपर हमें एक नया दृष्टिकोण देकर जाते हैं। तो आज हम एक विषय के ऊपर चर्चा करने जा रहे हैं जो कि आपने भी, मैंने भी, सभी लोग जो इस डिस्कोर्स में है, वे उन्होंने देखा ही होगा। आजकल हम देखते हैं कई सारे नए-नए पॉडकास्ट आ चुके हैं, कई सारे लेखक हैं, कई सारे वक्ता हैं, जो धर्म संबंधित विषयों के ऊपर कहते हैं। तो अब यहाँ पर विडंबना ये आती है, अथवा मैंने देखी है, कि जब भी उन्हें भगवान के विषय में स्पष्ट रूप में पूछा जाता है, वे कहीं न कहीं हिचकिचा जाते हैं और एक बैक स्टेप लेके पुनः उनका जो टॉपिक है, वो वापस धर्म के विषय में ही घूमता है, धर्म की यूटिलिटी के विषय में घूमता है, उसी के आस-पास घूमता है। पर कोई स्पष्टता से यह नहीं कहता है कि हाँ, ईश्वर है और अपौरुषेय के विषय में नहीं कहता है। तो आज हम कुछ इसी विषय के ऊपर चर्चा करेंगे और हमारे साथ जुड़े हैं अजय भैया, अजय भाई जी। जय श्री राम अजय भाई।
Yeah, sure, Vedan. Thanks for having me again. And that's a very good introduction to the topic, I believe, because I've seen a lot of people that I know who are interested in discussions like this, both in India and also here in the West. Everyone's interested, and I understand if the Western mind doesn't talk the way that we talk about it, but it's strange that Indians don't talk about it the way that it's supposed to be discussed, because it is our philosophy, it is what we sort of have to take forward, and it's I don't know, I find that there is a false consensus effect around this issue, where you have a preferred perspective on a certain topic, and then you think that this preferred perspective on the said topic is preferred also by the society at large, and that is why you keep repeating it without ever someone pointing it out to you that, hey, that is not what I think is right, or it is okay, but there is also a broader discussion that needs to be happened. So without using a lot of jargons, I would like to say that when it comes to discussions around dharma, particularly dharma, people very often talk about, as you said, the utility of dharma, because it is a very utilitarian concept, at least in the Indian religions that we have. We have Buddhism, we have Jainism, we have Sikhism, Hinduism, like the Sanatan Dharma, the Vedic religion, etc., and many others in India. And all of them have a definition of what dharma is, and they understand what it is. And from a purely utilitarian point of view, it has nothing to do with God, it has nothing to do with supernatural forces or divine forces on the surface. It is just organization of society. And unfortunately, because today we are in the most prominent, the winner philosophy, that's what I call it, the philosophies, or at least the worldview that has won after, at least in the last 200 300 years, is the Western philosophy of Protestant philosophy of which rejects God, but also keeps the so-called Christian way of living, the Christian way of living. It's intact, but without the church, or without the God, or without the divinity in it. So Protestant atheism, that's what I call it. So unfortunately or fortunately, depends on how we look at it, this is the narrative, and somehow we feel, Indians more or less, we feel that we have to fit in to this worldview. Well, I don't agree with it, although it is the reality. I don't agree with it essentially, but that is what is enabling all of the discourses. When Indians talk about dharma, they talk about the utility of dharma, but they never go to the broader discussions or the more abstractions of it, where we deal with concepts of Apaurusheyata Vidya. I mean, I was just watching a podcast by very prominent influencers on social media. They were talking about dharma is inevitable. They use fancy words. Dharma is inevitable. It is just a natural consequence of society ordering itself, and these things emerge, and it is an evolutionary aspect of humanity, etc. They talk about it in very fanciful terms to say that dharma, or is something that is essential for the sustenance of society and civilization, it is not man-made. Just to say this one thing, they're using all of these fancy words. They're saying it's just natural, it's just, we just have to follow these things in order to ensure success of society, or they give examples of a startup, etc. So I don't want to make any pull any punches, but fundamentally they will never say that it is Apaurushaya in the way that we understand it, you and I understand it. Apaurushaya is basically fundamentally that, something which doesn't have an author, a human author, something that is not made by a human being. That is what Apaurushaya is, and there are many Apaurushaya concepts that exist, and Dharma is one of them. And this is missing somehow. And if you ask them, then they'll be, obviously you have to point to a higher reality, which on the surface, again, it doesn't seem like it's a utilitarian concept. When I say Apaurushaya, you would say that, then you assume that there is a God and all of this, and then it doesn't seem utilitarian. It seems absurd. It seems like you're insisting on belief, etc. Whereas I'm not doing that. I'm simply stating the fact that there are certain things that doesn't really need a human being to invent or conceptualize it. It simply exists. It depends on who you are, depending upon what culture you belong to. You choose some of these concepts and you agree to follow them as a society. All of these, not just Hindu, the dharma that we talk about in the Eastern religious framework, also in the Western frameworks, there are laws, there is a way of organizing society. All of these are abstract concepts that people at some point came together and they agreed that this is what our civilization is, this is what our culture is, and we are going to follow this way of life. That's what I wanted to say, and then we can build the discussion on top of this.
As you said about Protestant atheism, and you gave us a highlight of what is Apaurushaya. You said कि आपको believe करना नहीं है, but I have a question है मेरा है, but we as a practicing Hindus, we do believe कि वेद as प्रमाण, वो भी तो एक बिलीफ ही होता है ना, कि हम वेद को, जैसे हम कहते हैं वेदांत वेद्यम विभुम, भगवान को जानने के लिए हम वेद मार्ग अपनाते हैं, वेद के थ्रू जाते हैं, या फिर जो वेद कहते हैं हम वह मार्ग अपनाते हैं. तो क्या यह भी एक बिलीफ नहीं हुआ?
देखो, मैं आता हूँ इस बात पर, बट वहां तक जाने से पहले हमें पहले ये स्पष्ट करना चाहिए कि हम किसके बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि हवा में बातें नहीं हो सकती हैं. पहले तो देखो, जब मैं बोल रहा हूँ, तुमने ठीक कहा कि जो धर्म है उसका अथॉरिटी वेद है, वेदों से ही उसका डेरिवेशन होता है. दैट इज व्हाट इज सेड इन धर्मशास्त्रस, वहां से डिराइव होता है. एंड ऑल ऑफ दीज आर बाय डेफिनेशन अपौरुषेय, Vedas and the Dharma Shastras. Well, Dharma Shastras are subject to interpretations, etc. Let's not get into that. But fundamentally, it is derived from an Apaurushaya source, and Vedas are the Apaurushaya source. Now, your question of whether if I am a practicing Hindu or a practicing, I don't know, Nyayika, Mimamsa, etc. Advaitin, Dvaitin, there are many pantheons within Hinduism. So the first fundamental insistence is that should I believe in the Vedas? So my counterpoint is I am not insisting on the belief of Vedas, because that just beats the point, because Vedas are basically epistemic tools, right? And this is what I want to address. I think it needs to be addressed clearly at some point by someone. And I'm making an attempt, and I'm encouraging other people. I'm not claiming that I'm the smartest person on the planet. I'm not claiming that I know everything. There are obviously better people at telling you this than me. I just want to clarify that I don't come from any tradition, but I just want to clarify this following fact, is that it depends really on what questions you're asking and what you want to really solve and understand. Right? So I'm a scientist. I'm a computer scientist. I have a set of logical questions that I want to answer, for which I use an epistemic method, which is more or less logical. Some of it is experimental, and that to reach a conclusion. So I have a question, and to reach the answer of that question, I set up a framework of experimentation, methodology, falsification, verification of ideas, and I reach it. So broadly, I can classify this exercise in 3 categories. The first category is obviously the physical, materialistic, or materialism that we call, which has to do a lot with your sensory verification. So if you have a question today about, I look at something which is, I look at a small stone. The question I can ask is, what is this stone made of? And then I can develop theories of what the stone is made of, and then come to a hypothesis that maybe there exists a fundamental particle that makes up everything, including rocks, walls, buildings, trees, etc., the natural world. And that is essentially the conceptualization of the atom, right? Vaisheshikas did this. I'm not saying Vaisheshikas thought of the atom in the way that the modern physicist does. They have not. I'm not claiming it in any way. But making that idea, coming up with that idea is something very, very common. People do this all the time. Now, in order to verify it, verify if this is right or wrong, that is a whole different ballgame, right? Now, it is a material question. The question is about, evidence. I'm looking for evidence in the material world. Then I apply methods which are also more or less broadly material, expecting an answer which is within this sensory framework. I have a sensory framework of my 5 senses, and this question falls in that realm. So that is the first category, I would say. So this has everything that is, your touch, feel, sight, smell, etc. All of this, everything comes into this. But obviously, in the world, there are other things that exist which are not verifiable through your sensory systems, right? A simple example of this is also, again, the existence of, around us right now, the two of us, around us, there are radio waves that they're present. It's a fact, right? But show me one person who has seen radio waves, who has felt radio waves touching them, who has smelt them with a sense. It's impossible. It's not possible to do this. And in order to now see, okay, it is still a material, it is still existing as a material thing, right? It is still a material thing, because we have today devices like this phone, which can produce, transmit, and receive radio signals, because of which this communication is even enabled. And before we made these devices, we conjectured, or we thought about it logically, about what we ideated the existence of these radio waves, and then we made some fundamental principles which the physicists came up with, and then we moved on to advanced mathematics, and then the instrumentation of objects of these devices, which we use in daily life. So that's the second category, which is addressed using logic, which is more or less, the going from the question to the evidence of that question. It is all logical. Some of it is material, because obviously you need these devices to materialize your ideas. But fundamentally, the question and the answer are both logical, in the sense that, do radio waves exist? Do these abstract waves exist in nature? Yes, they do exist. That is the answer. Now, if I take this exercise a little higher, in a more abstract sense, if we move out of the framework of your sensory inputs, your sensory environment, if you move out of the realm of logic, because logic is not utilitarian, it is not right all the time. Because if you study logic, so logic comes, in logic, when you study logic, syllogisms, you make premises. You make premise 1, you make premise 2, you make premise 3. You can have any number of premises, and then you draw inferences from each of these premises, right? Now, this inference is probably not always right in reality. I can give you an example right now. So I can start with the premise that all cats can fly, and that's my first premise. The second premise is Whiskers is a cat, and the conclusion that I draw from these two statements is that Whiskers can fly. But evidently, this is not true, because cats can't fly. Now, logically, it is consistent, and logically it is correct, but practically it is wrong. Why? What is this? So now I can discern this, or I can tell as a human being, what is this? Like, why is it wrong? Why is that flawed? What is that fallacy? We call it false premises in logic, of course. But essentially, what is driving that realization is your experience. And we miss this in all our discourses. Everyone is not talking about it. No one wants to talk about it, because it's so subjective and so unclear about what we're talking when we talk about experience, is that experience is something that validates each of your modes of realization. I can go on and explain a little bit about why experience is the most fundamental thing that we should talk about when you talk about evidence. But if you have some questions, or if you want to pause me, because I've been talking for a bit, so I will wait and then we can continue.
You can continue about your experience. You can tell about that experience which you're going to.
Yes. So when we talk about epistemology, or in the Sanskrit word pramanas, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I would also like you to tell experience. Do you remember the article which you have written on experience?
Yes,
You did
I
send
remember
it to
it.
me from few months ago. So I would like you to include that also in your talk.
Yeah, so I wrote a little bit. It's not a very elaborate thing. I wrote a little bit about why experience matters from the point of view of Dvaita philosophy. So Madhvacharya introduces experience, Anubhava, as a pramana itself, which nobody else does. So that's something that I've written about extensively also in my journals, private journals, which I have not published yet. At some point I will in the future. But there is an article that I wrote with Dhiti in the Dhiti blog by Bhrit. So you can take a look at it. Maybe you can put it in the link. I don't know, in the YouTube video. But essentially, what I want to say is that when we talk about epistemology or pramana shastra that we talk about, experience is the one that enables everything else. So pratyaksha, if you take pratyaksha, is enabled by experience. Anumana is enabled by experience. Shabda is also ultimately enabled by experience. Experience is the common denominator for all pramanas to be valid, right? I will give you an example again. So let me illustrate what I just said. Let me say that I see that I'm on a mountain, I'm hiking, I see the scenery. There are nice mountains, there are trees, lakes, the sky, etc., the stars. My eyes are perceiving it, right? But in order for me to come to this realization that this is real versus this is false, there is an experience within me which is sort of telling me this is right, this is real, or this is false, right? Similarly, when I think of a logic, there is an experience within me which tells me that this logic is absurd and therefore it is wrong, and this logic is correct and therefore I will accept it as true. So there is this experience which sort of enables this discernment within me, which is sort of missed in all of our discourse. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it because with Indians, I don't know why we don't talk about it, because this is what all of the whole philosophy is. But I understand why the Western philosophers don't really talk about it that much, because that's not what the philosophy is about in the West. But logically, you can't. Now that's the question that I'm asking. So as the third, on the categories of investigative, the question and answers that I introduced in the beginning, this is the last category this is the category which comes at the end. So my questions are basically experiential questions. My question is, I exist and experience this existence constantly without my choice. Now, what is that experience and who is this experiencing these things? That is the question that I'm asking, and essentially that is what motivates this famous "Who am I?" question, which everyone asks in Indian philosophy. So basically, that question itself is an experiential question. And now, if you want to investigate this question and answer it ultimately, then it also has to be an experiential answer, right? You cannot everything. You can have proxies to measuring experience. So I can give a lot of examples from neuroscience, because I study this sort of in my free time, and also questions of logic, etc., and experience itself also I deal with them on a daily basis when I do my PhD. But without getting into a lot of jargons, I don't want to give jargons. Without getting into all of that, I will just say that you can have proxies of your experience, because if you feel pain, if you feel sad, there is a physical manifestation of that sadness or the pain that you're feeling, that you can measure by probing your body or probing your brain. You can measure and it's a proxy, right? You can measure it in that way. But in and itself, your senses or the thing that you're measuring to sort of get the proxy to this experience, that is not experience in itself, right? So there are some hormones that is secreted when I feel happy, There are endorphins that go up when I have a good exercise or I have a nice chat with a beautiful girl. All of this happens in the brain, but that's all of these are proxies to the experience that we're having, and these proxies can be measured. But you cannot say that this is experience in itself. You cannot say that. So that's what I wanted to say, because now it is completely subjective. We are in that realm where experience is uniquely individual to you and me, and that is the problem, right? So we don't address this enough when we talk. And what I want to say is, logically also, it is not. We cannot probe this question even logically, because existence is absurd in the logical sense, because it's a very big, it's a circular, it's cogito ergo sum, right? So it's a circular logic. I exist because I exist. There is no other way to understand it other than the fact that it is just what it is. It is I exist, you exist, and there is no way for me to logically tell that Vedanta exists. I can't do that logically. You know it because you have the first-hand evidence, a subjective experience of Vedanta existing. You have it. I don't have it. I have the subjective experience. I have the subjective first-hand understanding of Ajey exists. And that's why it is really difficult to probe it from a materialistic point of view, with all of these probes in your brain, in your body, etc. You can measure experience. It is really difficult to look at this question from a logical perspective. Then what do? You have asked this question, like, who am I, what am I, and what is this experience of existence? You've asked this question. Now, how do you arrive at this? And that is where this pramanas that you asked in the beginning, why are Vedas pramanas, right? Now I'm coming to the answer. So to answer your question, I'm not insisting you to agree with me that they are pramanas. I am just saying that they are pramanas, right? Why they are pramanas is a different question, and you have to understand it, you have to inquire it, you have to reach this understanding. But I will say, I can use logic to sort of arrive at the place where we can at least agree that Vedas are pramanas. I can say that, okay, since it's an experiential question, my methods of verifying this, the answers, verifying my theories about this question, about the nature of reality and nature of experience, is also an experiential exercise. And experiential exercises are recorded in these Apaurusheyata texts, which are not written, authorless, nameless, etc. And I'm just saying that these are pramanas. I'm not claiming you to believe that they're pramanas. I'm not asking you to believe that there is a God or anything. I'm just saying that these are pramanas. And by pramanas, I mean pramanas literally tools, right? Epistemic tools. And it's like this spoon, or it's like a pair of scissors or a pen that you use to achieve something. And I'm also saying that Vedas have this. They are pramanas, and they are Apaurushaya by nature. Nobody has written them. They're authorless, nameless, faceless. And they are means to understanding or achieving the answers to this question, which is fundamentally experiential. And whether you accept it or not is up to you, right? But to completely say that, no, I am completely, it's like, I will not believe in Shabda as a valid pramana, I'm just going to reject it outright, that's a little arrogant. I think that comes from a position of arrogance. And you say that it doesn't matter to me, all of these questions in my day-to-day mundane existence. That's a valid thing to say. But at the same time, you cannot reject the fact that you are experiencing constantly, even in the mundane things that happen to you in life, you're experiencing them. And I am a curious person. I want to explore this question, like, what is this experience about and why am I experiencing it? And I want to answer this question through the utilitarian perspective, using a utilitarian tool, these Vedas, these Vangmayas. And these are fundamentally tools for me. And that is what pramanas are. Pramanas are prama anayati iti pramanaha. I've written it in the article. And it brings you right knowledge. Right? It brings you right knowledge. No one's insisting. Show me one person who has insisted on belief, who has really seriously thought about these things, who has insisted on belief. Nobody has said this. If you look at Mangalacharanas of different authors that have come and gone in the Indian subcontinent, they have written about God as aprameya. They have written about God as someone who transcends time, space, and all of these, like material world, etc. They've never insisted on belief. They have just said that Vedas are pramanas. Saying that statement doesn't mean you have to believe in them. I am just saying that they are valid instruments to reach to this understanding of reality. And of course, there needs to be a reproducible thing, right? It has to be reproducible in order for it to be true. But reproducibility is subjective, unfortunately, and that is why it is up to you to get into it and then seriously keep doing this until you reach there. I will stop now because it's becoming now a little verbose.
So
I understand.
it is basically like the proof of pudding is in the eating. कि आपको
Yes.
सही कह रहे हो.
Yes, yes, बिल्कुल, बिल्कुल. The proof of the pudding is in the eating, but also why should you eat? That is the question, right? People are asking मुझे वेद को प्रमाण मानना क्यों है? That is the question people are asking. And I'm not मानना इसलिए है क्योंकि भाई ये ऐसा प्रश्न है जो आपने प्रश्न जो पूछा है, that is essentially an experiential question which cannot be reproduced using material objects or any logic or anything. Therefore, please look at this. These are the guidelines that people who have experienced it before have written down. And if you follow the same steps, you will also reach it. That is what I'm claiming. I'm not claiming that आज तुम विष्णु में भगवान में आप बिलीव नहीं करोगे तो आप वैष्णव नहीं होने. I'm not saying. Show me one like person who can claim that, who are serious about this. Nobody is insisting on belief. So don't get me wrong. And that is what I wanted to just bring out.
जो आपने मंगलाचरण के विषय में कहा तो उससे मुझे अध्यात्म रामायण का श्लोक है जो सर्वप्रथम आता है, सबसे पहले आता है. उसमें भी ये आता है, शिव जी के लिए है वो, अप्रमेय प्रयातीत निर्मल ज्ञान मूर्तये मनोगिराम विदुराय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः. माने जो प्रत्यक्षादि प्रमाणों से परे है, त्रिगुणातीत, तो ये उनका मंगलाचरण है. तो आपने जो कहा सही कहा कि हमें बहुत सारे देव भगवान की स्तुति में भी यह पता चलता है. अब जो आपने एक्सपीरियंस के विषय में कहा, भैया मेरा ये प्रश्न यह है कि तो जो भी हमारे अलग अलग जो संप्रदाय आए हैं, जैसे द्वैत हो गया, विशिष्ट अद्वैत हो चुका है, अद्वैत हो चुका है, तो क्या यह भी उनका एक पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस थ्रू वेद ही आया है, या आपका क्या है ओपिनियन तो नहीं कहूंगा, आपका क्या मत है इसके ऊपर? मतलब आप किस दृष्टिकोण से इस चीज को देखते हो? क्योंकि आज हम देखते हैं कि अद्वैत बहुत फैल गया है, और उसी जगह पर जहाँ पे हमें द्वैत में भी बहुत अच्छे सिद्धांत है, जैसे जो मध्वाचार्य जी ने कहा, अलग लेवल्स दिए हैं जीव के, हायरार्कीज उन्होंने कुछ कुछ बताई है. यह इतना हमें आज के समय में सुनने में या फिर पढ़ने में, दक्षिण भारत का तो नहीं कह पाऊंगा, पर उत्तर भारत में बहुत कम मिलता है. तो आप समझ रहे हो ना कि मैं क्या कहना चाहता हूँ? तो आपका क्या मत है, फिर आपका क्या दृष्टिकोण है इस चीज के ऊपर?
देखो, मेरा मत इस बात में, पहले तो मैं ये साफ कहना चाहता हूँ कि मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग अभी भी बहुत डेप्थ में नहीं है. मैंने कोई भी ट्रेडिशनल स्कूल से कुछ भी सीखा नहीं है. जो भी सीखा है मैंने खुद से सीखा है, जो भी पढ़ा है खुद से पढ़ा है. सो इन दैट वे व्हाटएवर आई से नेक्स्ट might sound sort of immature or sort of superficial, but that's fine. I understand that. तो मेरा मत ये है कि जो भी भारत के वाङ्मय में जो है, आपके दर्शनों में जो आपको मिलता है, षट दर्शन हो गया, उसके बाद जो वेदांत है उसमें भी आपका द्वैत, अद्वैत, विशिष्ट अद्वैत है. आज बहुत व्याप्ति में जो है वो अद्वैत है, और अद्वैत को यहाँ वेस्ट में ऐसे एक्सपोर्ट किया गया है बुद्धिज्म के थ्रू अद्वैत को एक्सपोर्ट किया गया है यहाँ पे. तो अद्वैत more or less, the soup of consciousness, all of these things that people talk about, it is more or less, it derives from these things. तो मेरा मत ये है कि ठीक है, वो बातें तो बहुत, it's a lot of language, it's a lot of linguistic exercise, like sort of logical dialectics that is necessary for you to reach to a concrete understanding of what people mean when they say that reality is one, there's like one Brahman, and basically you are Brahman, aham brahmasmi, and when etc. So इस विषय पर मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग बहुत नहीं है, बट आई कैन अंडरस्टैंड दैट आई अंडरस्टैंड the arguments that each of these schools give, the fundamental arguments that they have made in order to support their position. I do understand that. So for example, अद्वैत के शंकराचार्य जी क्या करते हैं कि एक महावाक्य लेते हैं, एक मतलब there are multiple महावाक्यास that he chooses and to support अद्वैत, ठीक है। तो वहाँ पे दूसरी जगह पे द्वैत के जो मध्वाचार्य हैं जिनका मैं अनुयायी हूँ, मतलब बाय बर्थ एक्सेट्रा, वहाँ पे वो लोग क्या करते हैं कि दे टेक अद्वैत, दे टेक विशिष्टाद्वैत, एंड देन दे सॉर्ट ऑफ polemically they sort of dismantle the arguments through logic. Of course there the logic comes in, like obviously at the end जो है तुम्हारा पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस, अनुभूति जो है, दैट इज द अल्टीमेट थिंग that happens. But fundamentally when you start, you have to start with some logic, you have to start with some sort of common framework under in which you work. So I think as an Indian I would insist or sort of urge everybody to not insist, I would not insist on anything, but तुम्हारी मर्जी है भाई मैं तो बस I would urge everyone to look at these things and quite honestly very clearly just train your mind to really think about what is being read. आप अभी unfortunately problem ये हुआ है कि बहुत सारे पुस्तकों को पढ़ लेते हैं लोग, everyone is like मैंने ये पढ़ लिया, वो पढ़ लिया, ये ऑथर जॉर्डन पीटरसन, पता नहीं कितने लोग फलाने को पढ़ा, उसका ये है, ढिंकाने को पढ़ा, ये फाइन गुड, तुम्हारा क्या है, तुम्हारा मत क्या है, व्हाट इज योर ओरिजिनल सॉर्ट ऑफ, व्हाट हैव यू मेड आउट ऑफ ऑल ऑफ दीस इन्फ्लुएंसेस दैट यू हैड, क्योंकि दैट इज व्हाट मैटर्स राइट, एट द एंड तुम्हारा निष्कर्ष क्या है, तुम्हारा अनुभव क्या है. And that is sort of missing because people are now, I'll use another jargon, it's called the bandwagon effect. Bandwagon effect हो गया है. It is sort of cool to talk about spirituality. It is sort of cool to talk about अरे मैंने आज षड्दर्शन संग्रह के जो commentaries दिए हुए हैं वो मैंने सारे पढ़ लिए. It's cool to talk about it in people in universities. They do this. So instead of just doing that, it's just sit down. एक ले लो यार तुम, just read one sentence, one verse from the Bhagavad Gita or one sort of canon, right? It could be one slok, but clearly understand what is being said and sort of analyze it from the point of view of experience. तुम्हारे जीवन में जो experience हो रहा है तुम्हें, उस दृष्टिकोण को लेके put that first, put your experience first, and then you try to look at this shlok. But don't look at these shloks or don't look at these criticisms, arguments, the polemics, etc. वाद विवाद जो आपको recorded मिलता है literature में, don't look at it on its own independently. उसको मत देखो unless it is verified by your experience. It has to support your experience. तो मेरा तो यही कहना है, मेरा मत यही है कि आपका जो अनुभव है उसके अनुसार आपको जो ठीक लगता है भारतीय वाङ्मय में उसको ले लो. अगर आप, यदि आप चार्वाक भी कह लेते हो अपने आप को एट द एंड, वो भी ठीक है, देयर इज नथिंग रॉन्ग विद इट बिकॉज इट इज योर एक्सपीरियंस, राइट? बट यू हैव टू बी वेरी क्लियर व्हेन यू से दैट यू आर समथिंग, देन यू हैव टू जस्टिफाई इट नो मैटर हाउ मेनी पीपल क्वेश्चन यू. ऐसे इंटेलेक्चुअल अटैक्स होते हैं कि भाई देखो, लोग बोलते हैं कि चार्वाक है, ठीक है, वो बहुत सारे लोगों मैंने मिला हूँ, लोग बोलते हैं कि निरीश्वरवादी हूँ मैं चार्वाक हूँ, मैं ये हूँ वो हूँ. तो मैं सिंपल सा क्वेश्चन पूछता हूँ, ठीक है, तो तुम अनुमान में नहीं मानते, अनुमान प्रमाण में नहीं मानते हैं चार्वाक, ठीक है, जो भी है उनका सेंसरी फ्रेमवर्क में के अंदर जो है वही है. तो मैंने पूछता हूँ कि भाई तो फिर अनुमान के हिसाब से तुम्हारा रेडियो बंद होना चाहिए, देयर शुड बी नो स्पेस. स्पेस को किसी ने परसीव नहीं किया है, नोबडी हैज टच्ड स्पेस, नोबडी हैज टेस्टेड स्पेस, nobody has smelled space. Space is an inferential thing. You infer that space exists because of absence of objects, right? तो their worldview falls flat. तो फिर बाद में बोलते हैं कि नहीं, चार्वाक in the sense that I believe in, I also believe in logic, I believe in scientific method, but I will not believe that there is a God. तो मैंने बोला कि if you believe in something, if you already you said it that you believe in logic, you believe in the scientific method, तो belief अगर तुम कर रहे हो, you are ready to believe something, but you are not ready to believe something that you don't want to believe. कि भगवान का जो अस्तित्व है, भगवान की जो सत्ता है, उसमें तुम बिलीव नहीं करोगे, ठीक है, but you will believe in the scientific method, whereas scientific method itself says that it is absurd to say that you believe in the scientific method because it is funny. Scientific method keeps evolving. There is no absolute truth in science. तो यही बात है कि you have to be very clear when you say that I am a charvak or I am a न्यायिका, I am a मीमांसका, or I am a Vedanti. You have to have solid arguments behind that statement to support your position. Otherwise, anybody, that's what's happening in society today. कोई भी कुछ भी बोल रहा है and no one is questioning them. They use really fancy words. These are the people, unfortunately or fortunately, have reached influential positions because of how they speak, what they speak, regardless of the content of the speech, right? That is my only sort of request to young people. जो 20-25 like 30 जहाँ तक लोग पहुँच गए 30 के ऊपर तो छोड़ दो, मैं मतलब मुझे तो बात नहीं कर सकते because they're set in their ways. It's too late for them to change or sort of accept that they're wrong. वो उम्र हो चुकी होती है and that is the ego is now solidified, etc. But in this age, right, I think it's very important to build that sort of image or sort of your identity around sound reasoning and really clarity of thought. अगर आपके पास clarity of thought नहीं है, आप कुछ भी बोल रहे हो, तो फिर क्यों कर रहे हो? Why are you even in this exercise? Don't do it. कुछ भी करो और करो, तुम जाके पार्क चले जाओ, पब चले जाओ, डांस बार चले जाओ. No one like मजे करो. Why do you bother with these things? That is my point.
मेरा इसके ऊपर प्रश्न है भैया, जैसा आपने कहा कि थॉट प्रोसेस डेवलप करो, आपने यह भी कहा कि पुस्तकें पढ़ो, ठीक है, अच्छी बात है, पर एक पुस्तकों को अपनाओ या फिर एक ओवी को ही अपनाओ, वो आपने कहा. तो अब मेरा प्रश्न है कि जो अपने थॉट प्रोसेस डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर, और जो आपने कहा कि चिंतन और अनुसंधान करो जो पढ़ते हो, बराबर, तो आप कुछ क्या रिकमेंड करोगे, फिर कोई एक पुस्तक या फिर क्या, जिससे आपने कहा कि वो उस एक ओवी या फिर एक श्लोक से आप सब 360 व्यू लो लाइफ का, तो वो मतलब कैसे करें?
नहीं, ये डिफिकल्ट है. देखो, फर्स्ट
हाँ,
ऑफ ऑल,
तो यह प्रॉब्लम सब
एक
फेस
मिनट.
करते हैं.
फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल मैं ये बोलना चाहता हूँ कि आई डोंट रेकमेंड स्टिक टू वन बुक. मैंने कभी नहीं कहा ये, तुमने मैं अभी इंटरप्रेट किया. दैट इज नॉट व्हाट आई सेड. सो डोंट स्टिक टू वन बुक, रीड एज मच एज पॉसिबल. वो अच्छी बात है, बट मेरा ये है कि अनुसंधान और जो तुमने हिंदी में जो बोला, संस्कृत में जो बोला,
चिंतन. हाँ, चिंतन.
चिंतन.
हाँ, थिंक ओवर इट, जो आपने पढ़ा है उसके ऊपर, जो
हाँ,
आजकल
तो
होता नहीं है.
so
रीडिंग
you should
365 बुक्स a year.
see the difficulty in that is that actually I don't know, क्योंकि मेरा खुद का रूममेट यहाँ पे बैठता है और उसको मैंने तर्क संग्रह दिया and it was really difficult. I don't know, मतलब जो मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग है, एक मैं पढ़ता हूँ किसी चीज को और जो मेरी अंडरस्टैंडिंग आ जाती है और उसकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग जो आ जाती है वो बहुत अलग है. एंड देयर इज अ वेरी इजी रूल. मतलब खुद से आप जब पढ़ते हो शास्त्रों को, खुद से आप जब अपनाते हो, ये करते हो, देयर इज अ वेरी बिग पॉसिबिलिटी दैट यू आर ऑफन रॉन्ग. आई एम नॉट सेइंग आई एम राइट, बट मेरा क्या है कि आई एम वेरी फॉर्चुनेट इनफ इन माई फैमिली. आई कैन गो बैक, आस्क माई अंकल, आस्क माई ब्रदर, ask my mother, my father. They will know, they know these things, so I can ask them and they will tell me if my understanding is right or not. तो मैं ये बोल रहा था कि unfortunately अभी बैटरी बंद हो गई, तो I have to move to my room and connect the iPad to the charger. Sorry for that. But essentially मैं ये बोल रहा था कि I am very lucky that way because my upbringing is in a certain way and I got all the right things that I think are right currently. But when I was growing up, I did not think it was the right thing for me when I was growing up. So for example, अभी मैंने तर्क संग्रह पढ़ा, ठीक है, मुझे मेरे दोस्त ने दिया ये पुस्तक, who has studied this. So I can go to him if I read this and if I have questions, I can go to him and I can ask him, अरे मेरी समझ जो है ठीक है कि नहीं है. If I give it to someone else, they might not have the same privileges as me. That is unfortunately the fact of life, and I acknowledged it that I am privileged in that way. तो मेरा यही है कि अगर आप इस ऐसे शास्त्रों को आप उठाते हो, पढ़ना शुरू करते हो, तो don't do it on the internet, because internet is, and it's sort of ironic because this is going to be on the internet. The problem is that there are lots of people who talk about it with a certain confidence that they have not earned in their lives. And I'm not also acknowledging the fact that I have also not been through that kind of rigor that is necessary before you say something about something like this confidently. अगर आप बहुत सीरियस हो तो आप you can reach out to traditional people who learn this on a daily basis. This is their bread and butter. Go and take a course with them. इससे दो चीजें होती हैं. पहले तो देखो, अभी nobody wants to look at this from a very pedagogical point of view. Nobody wants to do this. आज आपने कितने लोगों को देखा है जो न्याय शास्त्र पढ़ते हैं in the traditional way, who are experts at this, who are experts at tarka, who are experts at I don't know, लघु सिद्धांत कौमुदी उठा लिया, व्याकरण में वो बन गए पंडित. There are there's very small micro minority of people who do this today seriously for a living. I mean, it is so difficult to make a living out of these things because it's not possible. कौन, अरे तुम बैठ के पढ़ाओगे लघु सिद्धांत कौमुदी पढ़ाओगे और तुम वहां पे निरुक्त पढ़ाओगे, तुम ज्योतिष पढ़ाओगे, who is going to come and listen to you, and who wants to learn this? Nobody wants to learn this. Everybody wants to learn computer programming. Everybody wants to become they want to have a life like this, what I have, etc. तो मतलब I'm not ये नहीं बोल रहा हूँ कि this is the ideal, but basically the comforts and the creature comforts that you need, this is what people look for. They don't look for anything else. But unless you are serious to take it up, don't take it up as a hobby that you do on YouTube. Don't do it as a thing that you watch Instagram reels and take knowledge from there. At least read the books. At least, मतलब seriously study करो जो आप कर रहे हो, seriously पढ़ो उसको. And then obviously initially there'll be a lot of like क्या मतलब दलदल है, इतना complicated things that they are talking about. It just seems pointless. But if you just go through that process of like feeling that frustration of अरे क्या बोल रहे हैं, क्या मतलब संस्कृत है, ये तो समझ नहीं आ रहा है, यहाँ पे पद विच्छेद नहीं हो रहा है मुझसे, समास नहीं समझ आ रहा है मुझे, all of these things you have to go through it, and then you have natural questions. These questions you can ask an expert and they will answer this for you. That is what I would say to answer your question.
और जैसा आपने कहा, आज के समय में हम थोड़े भाग्यशाली हैं क्योंकि कई एक दो प्लेटफॉर्म है जो ट्रेडिशनल स्कॉलर्स हैं उनके कोर्सेस वो लॉन्च किए हैं तर्क संग्रह आदि के विषय में भी, तो जहाँ पे जिन्होंने गुरु परंपरा के अंदर अध्ययन किया है वे सिखाते हैं. तो इसके अंदर हम भाग्यशाली तो है ही इस चीज के लिए कि अगर जिनको एनरोल करना है वो कर सकते हैं. ऐसे कई सारे प्लेटफॉर्म्स है आज के डेट में.
हाँ, तो just go to one of those people, and इसे दो चीजें, मतलब you also have this sort of internal satisfaction of learning these things if you're really inclined towards it, और उससे क्या होता है, उन लोगों की भी आजीविका आ जाती है ना, they get some income from this.
इनकम. तो दिस इज व्हाट धर्म इज की सस्टेनेंस भी तो ऐसे ही हो जाएगा ना, जो हम कहते हैं कि सस्टेनिंग प्रिंसिपल. हम फिर उसके अंदर अलग अलग चीजों को लेके आते हैं, पर जो मूल है, जो सिखाने वाले हैं, उनका भी सस्टेनेंस इंपॉर्टेंट है.
Nobody wants to talk to them, man. मतलब क्या अधिकार है मेरा और तुम्हारा, जो हजारों साल पहले लोगों ने सब कुछ छोड़ के सिर्फ इस पर ध्यान दिया और इसको डेवलप किया. योग शास्त्र हो गया, anything you take, anything, just take anything. We have a lot of things. Thousands of people have dedicated their lives in order to investigate it without want of fame, name, money, anything, just for the love of doing it. Who are you and I to sit down today and criticize them and say that अरे ये क्या है भगवान में मानने के लिए, I don't believe this, I don't take शब्द as प्रमाण. क्या औकात है भाई तुम्हारी शब्द को निकालने के लिए? What is like, ठीक है तुम्हारे पास IIT की डिग्री है, ठीक है, you are great, I'm not discounting all of that, but arrogance नहीं होना चाहिए ना. विद्या ददाति विनयम, कहाँ पे है विनय? वो नहीं है लोगों में. People are getting more and more arrogant. They're just more and more internal conflicts बढ़ गए दो लोगों में, unfortunately.
सही कह रहे हो. तो अब हम पॉडकास्ट के अंतिम चरण पे आए.
हाँ, तो एक मंगलाचरण से मैं इसका I want to end it. I want to say again, just bringing back the point of Vedas, Vedaha Pramanaha. So Pramanas are instruments that you can use to reach a certain desired goal. उसके विषय पर एक श्लोक है, बहुत मेरा प्यारा श्लोक है, मैं सबको बोलता हूँ। ये विष्णु तत्व निर्णय के उसका मंगलाचरण है वो। सदागमैक विज्ञेयम समतीतक्षराक्षरम नारायणम सदा वंदे निर्दोषाशेष सद्गुणम। ये जो श्लोक है, इसका मन यही बोलता है, जस्ट लिसन टू दिस वंस, अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट द मीनिंग इज, एंड जस्ट सिट विद इट। जस्ट आई डोंट नो, टेक अ वॉक इन द पार्क, जस्ट थिंक अबाउट इट। सदागमैक विज्ञेयम क्या बोल रहे हैं? सदा आगमों से ही एक चीज की ज्ञान मिल सकता है आपको। वो कौन सी चीज है? समतीत अक्षराक्षरम, वो चीज क्षर और अक्षर चीजों से परे है। नारायणम सदा वंदे निर्दोषाशेष सद्गुण, वो कौन है? वो कौन सी चीज है जो क्षर और अक्षर के परे है? वो नारायण है, उसको मैं वंदन करता हूं। और बस ये दिस इज व्हाट इट इज। सो यू हैव टू सिट विद थिंग्स लाइक दिस एंड कंटिन्यूअसली मनन होते रहना चाहिए in mundane, during your mundane activities that you so take for granted. At that time this is important.
इसके ऊपर मैं भी प्रयास करूंगा, क्योंकि मैंने कई बार आपको बहुत बार पूछा थॉट प्रोसेस आदि के विषय में, तो हर बार की तरह मुझे भी और दर्शकों को भी एक नया अनुभव हुआ है इस पॉडकास्ट में, कुछ नया जानने मिला है हमें इस पॉडकास्ट में कुछ। और आशा करेंगे कि इस पॉडकास्ट, जैसे हमने पिछले 2 पॉडकास्ट के साइंस एंड धर्म के टॉपिक 1 टॉपिक 2, उसके कई बार जब भी मैं कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में आता हूँ, कुछ ना कुछ नहीं समझ में आता है, तो वापस वो पॉडकास्ट सुनते रहता हूँ, सुनते तो कहीं ना कहीं कब ना कुछ तो क्लिक होगा ही। तो यह इसको हम तीसरा वीडियो मान ले उसी श्रृंखला का, क्योंकि हम
डाल दो,
चर्चा हमारी
डाल दो,
उसी संबंध में हो चुकी है।
डाल दो।
तो
निधिध्यासन करते रहो, ईश्वर प्रणिधान करते रहो। जय श्री राम।
तो जय श्री राम, धन्यवाद सभी का अभी तक जुड़े हुए हो। तो हम आशा करते हैं कि हम अजय भाई के साथ और एक नया पॉडकास्ट करें, एक विषय के ऊपर करना है, देखें अब कब समय मिले। सभी को राम राम, जय श्री राम, श्री राम जय राम, जय जय राम। धन्यवाद अजय जी।
जय श्री राम।